Thank you. A wise person once said that in business, if you go and spend all your money, you can always go and make more. But once you spend your time, it's gone forever. And such it is that time is our only truly scarce resource. So following up on what Guy said, I really congratulate you and thank you for coming out tonight, because I know time is valuable for each of us. And we are busy people, and it's easy to say no to events like this and to go and do something that might be outwardly more valuable. But hopefully after tonight, you'll realise that this was the place to be. So I'm going to do my very best to give you plenty to think about for sure, and more importantly, hopefully some tools, strategies and tactics that you can take away to make a really marked difference in the way that you not only run your businesses, but perhaps how you run your life. Because obviously time doesn't just stop in the business. The essence of tonight is really broken up into 4 key areas, and that is looking at what is the real problem that we're talking about when it comes to time. We're going to look at the principles behind time and how we use it. We're going to look at the habits that we practice on a daily basis, either consciously or subconsciously, and we're going to look at how we leverage ourselves in a way that can give us the outcomes we're looking for from a time point of view. Now, who's been to a time management seminar before? Can I see your hands? Okay, a couple of you. Who's read some books on time management? I've got one over there, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Carve. Anyone read that one? We're going to hear from Stephen later on. The interesting thing I find about time management is that sometimes we can read a book or we can go to a seminar. The problem is we might take 1 or 2 things away, but the problem is that we've got years of training in the way that we conduct ourselves, and we're going to talk about this when we get to habits, and sometimes it can be hard to shift those habits that we have. So, tonight is not about completely changing everything that you're doing with regards to time. It's about maybe taking just 1 or 2 things that you can change and implement, because the compounding effect comes in when we make small changes consecutively. They add up. So, tonight, obviously, is the second session in the series, and the first session we did tonight, the first session last week was on profit models and cash flow. And anytime we're working with a business, the very first thing that we work on is cash flow and profitability. The second thing we work on is time, simply because if you've got grand plans and grand visions for your business, if you don't know how to free up your time, then you'll never have the time to do the things that are required to grow the business. So we're going to talk about that. So let's dive into it. What is the problem? Well, you know the story. Too much to do, lack of personal time, out of balance, no family time, no vacations. The end result being that we often feel frustrated and stressed about the amount that we've got on our plate. So there's 2 ways that I think about time when it comes to being a business owner. There is time control, which is where we're still busy. We've got a lot going on, but we're not chaotic, we're not overwhelmed, and we're not stressed. And the second level is time freedom, which is the point where our business doesn't require us to be in it day in, day out for it to run well. And we've got a lot more conscious choice and autonomy on what we do with that time. Now, I think it's important to distinguish between these 2, because sometimes we can have, it depends what you've read and what you've heard from people. Sometimes there can be, I think, a delusion that goes on that makes us feel like if our business needs to be at this stage where we have all this free time because it just runs perfectly without us there. But depending on what stage your business is and what your aspirations are for the business, that may or may not fit with what you've got in mind. If you've got a lifestyle business right now, you're probably never going to get to the stage where you've got time freedom, depending on the business, of course, because the business is going to require you to be in it more than likely. But if you right now are at the stage where you're pretty crazy and you want to be at that time freedom, then the vision of your business needs to match that. To have complete time freedom, and we're going to talk about this more in the later sessions, it is about having a team behind you, it is about having the systems in place and having enough mass and scale about your business so you can achieve that. But tonight, it doesn't really matter which one you're looking for, because the concepts we're going to be talking about apply to both. What tonight is really about is more about your personal relationship with time and what you actually do on a day in, day out basis to make your time choices. So quick exercise for you. Have you got a pen and paper there? Yes? Okay, good. So I'm going to throw some words up on the screen, some unfinished sentences, and I would like you to complete the sentence. So the first one is, Time is. Just throw in whatever comes to mind. Time is. Next one. I am a something time manager. I'm a something time manager. Third one, busyness is caused by. I would be a better time manager if. Next one, people who are punctual are. And last one, the best time managers are that way because. So the title of this slide is your story, right? Because what you've just written down is the narrative that you have around, some concepts of time. Because the real problem is not so much the things that we have to do, but it's our choices and how we choose to use time and the habits that we have. So the problem is never the amount of time available, nor the number of things that we have to get done. The problem is always in how we choose to use, how we choose to use the time that we have. So how we choose to use, so it's a conscious choice that we're always making day in, day out. But obviously, our lives are busy and a lot of things coming at us, and we don't always sit there and consciously think about how we're choosing to use our time. A lot of the time we're on autopilot, and we just do, because that's the way that we've always done it, or that's what we've seen other people do, or that's what makes sense in the moment, or we haven't got another way to think about it, and sometimes we just don't think about it. But I'm going to share with you today that we're going to get into the tactics, we're going to get into the tools, but almost none of that is nearly as important as this point right here around the conscious choice. So thinking about what are your beliefs around time and what is your identity around time. So beliefs, like there's never enough time, or time just flies by, or I can never find the time I need. Are these the thoughts that run through our head day in, day out? Because if they are, they're creating a self-narrative that becomes our reality. So the first step is to really work out what goes on in our head with respect to time. And then what is your identity with regard to time and your relationship with time? So there's the previous slide where I asked you to fill in the blanks. That sort of gives you a little inkling as to what some of the thoughts are that you have that you maybe don't question or don't think about on a day-to-day basis. Whenever you're trying to create a new habit or a new character, if you like, we've got to start with intention around how we see ourselves in relation to that habit. And that's it, that's our identity. So for instance, you might fill in the blanks, I am something at choosing time investments. So that would be to fill something in there, either it's bad or it's good, you get to choose what it's going to be. But that starts to become the identity or the way you describe yourself in terms of the way you manage time. Critical starting point. So the starting point is to choose the identity that supports your goals and the time habits that you want to develop. So for example, I showed you before, but here's an example. I am in control of my time and I make choices that just support the life balance that I choose. Versus I never have enough time, there's never enough time to get things done. Two different narratives that go on inside your head. One supports better habits and one doesn't. Or I make intentional time choices and I'm assertive in preserving the balance I deserve. And the flip side on the habit side So you've got an identity that you want to craft around your relationship with time, and you want to make sure that the way you view time supports that. So time is a tool I use to create my ideal life. My use of time is my competitive advantage. Time is my most valuable resource. So just go back and have a look at the things you wrote down just a moment ago on your page and just reflect. I mean, there's no right or wrong to this, but the question is what you wrote down supportive of who you want to be as in terms of a person in their relationship to time? Or are they maybe thoughts and beliefs and identities that don't support the outcomes you want to have? Some good reading on this is James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. Anybody heard of that book? Yeah, great book. He does a lot of work there on identity. But let's look at some of the principles that are critical around time. So, on your bit of paper there, just like you to write down, what are your goals for 2021? Stemming from that, I'd like you to write down your top 3 priorities for this quarter. What are your top 3 priorities for this quarter? And then I'd like you to write down, what are your top 3 priorities for this week? And what's the last one?
Today.
What are the top 3 priorities for today? So in this fantastic book, which if you haven't read this one, I highly, highly recommend that as a reader or listen, however you like to ingest your material. Stephen talks about the 4 different quadrants that everything that we do can be split up into. We've taken the same concept but put it in a target format. So there's 4 quadrants, so we've got 4 levels to our target. We call this the time target. On the outside are things that are not important and not urgent. What might be some examples of things that are not important and not urgent? What do you think? Feel free to take your mask down while you're speaking, if you like. You want to say something? The phone ring, maybe, yeah. Yeah, what else? No one wants to admit to the things they do that are not important and not urgent.
Checking emails every 5 minutes.
Checking your email every 5 minutes. Good one, Harry. Thank you. What else? Surfing the web, maybe. Usually what's down here are things that fall in the, actually use the red, fall in the procrastination. So when we're spending time in this zone, we know that we're doing it usually, and we know we should be doing something else, generally speaking. The next one is things that are not important, but they are urgent. Oh. Not important, but are urgent. So this is the tricky one. This is a really tricky one. And this is what we call, when we spend time in doing things that are not important but urgent, it's called delusion. Because we're really busy doing things, but we're not doing things that are important. Now this begs the question, how do you decide if something's important or not important? Any ideas? I'll give you a clue. You just spend a few minutes writing them down. So the clearer you are on your goals, the easier it is to decide what's important and what's not important. Then the next one we move to is important and urgent. And this is demand. So this is like your best customer who is, got a fire that you absolutely need to solve today. It might be your best employee has just told you they're going to go and work for someone else. It might be, I don't know, some IT issue that caused all your systems to crash or something like that. So they're the things that absolutely have to be dealt with. But what's in the last little circle here? What's in the middle, do you think? Relationship to urgency and importance. What would be your guess? Super important? Well, so we've got not important, not urgent. We've got not important but urgent. We've got important and urgent. Important, thank you. Important but not urgent. So the crux of the concept is that the more time we spend on the things that are important but not urgent, what would be some examples of important but not urgent? Setting up a marketing campaign. Sorting out a website. Planning. Maybe what you're doing here, right? Hopefully it's important, right? But probably not urgent. So the thing is that more time we spend on things that are in here, then the less time we have to spend out here, because hopefully we're doing things in here that prevent this from happening. I'm not sure if you can ever completely eliminate this, but the idea is to be consciously spending time in these two things. And if you say, for example, right now, well, we get rid of this one through having goals that are meaningful and clear, and then we're less inclined to want to procrastinate and do things that are not important and not urgent. We get rid of this one, the not important but urgent, by just having that raised awareness on what am I being pulled into here, or what am I choosing to dedicate time to here, and is this really helping me move forward in my goals? So hopefully through that awareness, we can be spending most of our time here. And right now, if you are, say, 80% of your time is demand, and you can only spend 20% of time in this area here, that's a great starting point. Because if you're focused and you're doing the right things in here, gradually that bit will get bigger. And you can now spend 30% of your time in here and 70 here, and then 60-40, and so forth, and goes on and on. But it's about having a clear intention about what you're choosing to do to create the time. We're going to talk about what some of those things are. So that's one principle, understanding the balance between urgency and importance. The next one. So two scales here. We've got skill on one axis and value on the other axis. A skill obviously being how easy or hard something is to do, and value being the value towards achieving the goals that you've got. So, and what we're going to plot in here are all the things that you do on a daily basis. So from perhaps taking out the garbage through to putting together that marketing campaign, through to training your team or looking for a good hire or a strategic partnership, whatever it might be, everything that you do on a daily basis has an hourly rate attached to it. Now that's not necessarily, you can't always earmark exactly what the hourly rate is, but down the bottom here, you've got things that arguably are a minimum wage type task. Then you've got things up here that it can be really hard to put a dollar value on. Let's say it is recruiting, going after recruiting a highly valuable team member, right? I'm not sure how you put an hourly rate on that, but that can be a massively valuable thing for the organisation, or developing a strategic partnership to be able to grow your business. And everything in between, right? Between setting the website up or, fulfilling orders for your customers, whatever it might be, everything you do falls on this chart somewhere. People who are time poor are generally spending time, as we generally know we shouldn't be down in this quadrant, this little area here. We're generally aware of that. But because most of us are unconscious most of the time on what we are actually doing, we spend most of our time in this area here. We sort of know we should be up here, but that stuff's hard and it takes a lot of time and focus to do, and sometimes we've just got these burning things down here that unfortunately, most of the time are probably not important but urgent, but they take up our time. So when we get clear on what these things are up here, we can be more intentional in how we carve our time out, and we're going to get to how we do that. But if we can get to the stage where we're spending 80% of our time up here, which arguably are the things that are not urgent but are important, and we find ways to get this off our plate, our businesses can grow. But our businesses can never grow when we're spending time down in this area here. And we're going to do an exercise in a little while that's going to really bring that home. So one of the questions you want to ask yourself in relation to the relationship to this principle is, if I can only do 3 things in my business, 3 activities, like 3 core roles in my business, and 3 might be too many, but what are my top 3? Top 3 activities that bring the most value to me in my business? And how do I structure my time so I'm spending 80% of my time doing those 3 things? And those 3 things might also be aligned to where your strengths are, where your personal genius is, the things that you are just the best at, right? Which may not necessarily be the highest value activities, but where you can bring the most value to the organisation. So when you get clear on that and you can structure your time in that way, things move faster. Things just move faster because you're bringing more value to the organisation. So come back to what you wrote down there on your goals. And know that your goals serve as your compass for how you should be choosing to invest your time. So we're going to talk about some other actual strategies and tactics about how you do this, but you have demands on your time every single day that are either very in your face and conscious, or they're just very subliminal, like the email, like the phone ringing, like these things that just go on, like your family asking for things, right? These things go on. So when we start to get clear about how our time, we might be giving our time away in different areas. And I'm not suggesting giving your time away to your family is giving it away to the wrong spot, but sometimes it might be. We can become a little more disciplined and a little more, preserving on how we choose to give that time away. Now, we're going to flip over here and we're going to hear from Mr. Covey himself with a bit of a retro video. And let's see how well I'm doing with my technology.
Elizabeth, you have a work life?
I do.
Family life as well?
Mm-hmm.
Children?
Not yet.
Not yet. What's the nature of your work assignment?
I direct an international firm.
An international firm? Mm-hmm. So you really are interfacing with all kinds of people in the firm and outside the firm.
That's right.
You want a rich personal life and a rich family life. Do you ever feel like you get bogged down in the thick of thin things?
Yes.
Well, that might be analogous to all these little, small things that tend to fill our life. And that just little by little, they just accumulate. Now, your job, you can't go above this, is to get all those large rocks in the jar. Good luck. What's that one called?
Q2, planning, preparation.
Right. Planning, preparation, prevention, and empowerment. Mm-hmm. Okay, the next rock she's putting in there is called relationships and family. We didn't look at that third rock you put in there. That's employment, some key employment issue, and then you put major projects here. I can't get it above there.
I haven't worked it yet.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. That's called service, community, church. Do you ever feel like this?
Yes.
How many feel like this? By moving the little things around, you might squeeze in one more of those big major things. It's almost. Wow, that is good. You know, if it doesn't fit, force it. Here's something that's called urgent and important. It's a quadrant 1 thing that is blindsiding you, that it's your biggest client, that if you don't get back to that client now, you've given up your vacation, and you have no special block of time just for yourself, I'll tell you what you can do if you want to.
What's that?
You can take a whole different approach. You have a totally fresh bowl. You can work out of a different paradigm altogether.
Well, then I'd rather put these in the bottom and then pour the little pebbles on top.
Employment,
Big opportunity,
big opportunity.
important and urgent, block of time. Those young children keep looking at me. Glad my husband's not here. Now I dump these in there.
Okay? That's great.
So what's the concept? Put the big stuff in first, exactly. And this can take some discipline to do, to choose to put the most important things in the calendar first. But it's absolutely true. If you put them in first, all the other stuff that is less important than the big rocks, somehow it finds a place, or it just evaporates into the ether and you realize, oh, it doesn't really matter if that doesn't get done. So much of the time we can find ourselves in this notion of, I have to get this done, or other people expect me to get this done, or I really should get this done. But all this kind of language and all this kind of thinking is quite often based on a false paradigm. When we really sit down and say, if I was to think about what makes my life most meaningful, what makes my business most valuable, and we just do that stuff first and just say no to everything else, you'd be amazed at what can happen. Coming into these sessions, or whenever I'm talking about this, I make the claim that I can guarantee that anybody in the room can free up at least 15% of their time, and I stand by that. If you look at some of these principles and you go back and you take a hard look at how you're choosing to spend your time, I absolutely guarantee you can walk out of here today and free up at least 15% of your time. It might mean you stop doing some things that you thought were important, but as long as you're willing to question that and then put time to the things that are, you'd be amazed at what the outcomes can be. Now let me see if I can get the presentation back. What have we got there? Nope. All right, we're back on. So this is kind of, knowing the top 3 activities is kind of like knowing your big rocks. And I'm just talking about in a business sense, but obviously you can do this from a life perspective as well. If you're really clear on those things that are most important to you in your life, then you throw those in your calendar first. And we're gonna look at some tools for doing that. So another exercise for you. Again, what I'm sharing with you here is just to give you some different frameworks and ways to think about time, and then we're going to start to get into the tactics and tools of how you start to actually apply this stuff. But I want you to understand the principle and theory behind it first, so when you apply it, it's based in that context. Okay, so what is your time worth? So what I want you to do is to write down, this doesn't have to be precise, just start with some ballpark numbers, but how much money do you want to make in a year? And make that your, whatever salary you're pulling out from your business plus the profit that you want the business to make. Pick a number, and it doesn't have to be precise, just start with a number, and you can go home and do this again more accurately when you create some time to do it. But write down the amount of money you want to make and the number of hours that you want to work in a year. So if you want to make $100,000 and you want to work 30 hours a week, work out what 30 hours a week is in a year and write that number down. Feel free to use your calculator. So you got a number there and you got a number of hours. So then I want you to divide the money by the number of hours, so you'll get an hourly rate. So let's say you wanted 100,000 and your hours was going to be 2,000 hours in a year, what does that equal? $50 an hour? 350. $50 an hour. So the next thing, if you're going to hire someone for, in this case, $50 an hour, if you're going to hire someone for $50 an hour, what would you expect them to be able to do? What kind of value would you need them to bring to your business? Just jot down a few things. Whatever that hourly rate number is that you have written down there, what sort of things should that person be doing? Again, it doesn't have to be in one category, it can be broad, just whatever comes to mind. It's probably not going to be the filing. So there's a lot of copy there. But essentially, this is just one framework or one way to think about your time. If you look at that hourly rate that you've got there, every hour that you spend doing something that is less valuable than that, where you could hire somebody cheaper, means that you're either choosing to earn less money or to work more hours. It's not a precise science, but generally speaking, you can think about it that way. So it comes back to this philosophy. If you want to earn in this business, you want to earn that $100,000 a year for 2,000 hours of work, it's probably very unlikely you're going to do that if you're choosing to spend your time in this area here. You probably find you need to be up in this area here, right? And that hourly rate starts to give you an idea of the sort of, if you think about the other person you have to hire and what you'd expect them to do, it gives you a framework to start to think about it. So I've talked a lot about thinking, and I'm going to give you another quick exercise here just to challenge the way that you might be thinking about your time at the moment. Let's say that your business or your life, all of a sudden now you need to go and look after a family member, and it reduced the number of hours that you're going to work by half. So if you're currently doing 40 hours a week, now you're down to 20 hours a week. And you still, because of financial obligations, you still have to earn, or your business has to earn for you in terms of profit and your salary, the same amount of money. So that, I want you to think about it. I want you to start to jot down some ideas. How would you make that happen? If you had to work half the amount of time, but you had to earn the same amount of money, what are some of the things that you might have to do? Just write down a few ideas. Would you have to hire people? Would you have to use technology better? Would you have to be more organised in your marketing? Would you have to upskill your people or hire different people? Would you have to change your business model? If this was easy for you to do, then you'd change the question. You'd make it 1 day a week, right? If I can only work a quarter of the time, how would I do it? The idea is to ask a somewhat ridiculous question to get you to think about completely new things. Because one of the challenges we have as human beings is our thinking comes from, our patterns of thinking, our behaviour that we've displayed all of our life. And it can be really hard if you just think of some ideas you could manage your time better. That can be really hard to do. So if you pose a really ridiculous question that forces some constraints on you that really you can't solve with your current thinking, then it forces a new level of thinking. That's the idea of the exercise here. Or question some of your common assumptions. So right now there are certain things, there's expectations in your industry from your customers or suppliers or financiers or whatever it might be that you might find frustrating. How would you like it to be, and what might you do to change or test that? If our business would be so much more efficient if we didn't have to do X, or if we could do Y. I'd save a lot of time if I didn't have to do, what is it? If there was a better way to do. What if we stopped doing, offering, saying different things? Or getting some distance and perspective. This is one I personally use a lot. I find it helps put me in a different channel, other people's thinking. So if I employed someone else to run my company, what would I expect them to do? And what am I doing now that I wouldn't tolerate from a paid CEO that was running my company? Or if you've got a business idol or someone you respect highly in business, right? If they were running your company, how would they make time choices? And what would they do differently? I often use this one when I come across a problem. I'll pick 3 different names, say, how would so-and-so approach this problem? And just doing that puts you outside of yourself and allows you to sort of have some different thoughts that you may not normally have in everyday life. Expanding your vision. So sometimes if you think about, say you've got a problem right now, let's say there is a delivery problem in the way you're approaching a business and it's consuming you and you feel stressed about it. You're stressed based in the current context that you're thinking about, the size of your current business. But if you were thinking about building a business and you had a vision that was building a business that was 5 times bigger than what you're currently thinking about, all of a sudden the context of fixing this problem is not about necessarily fixing the problem, but it's a stepping stone to help you build something greater. So in terms of our perspective, if this is you, you've got a field of vision, what you can see and what your focus is. If you've got a small vision for your company, like that, the obstacles will be visible. But if you've got a big vision, the obstacles that are obstacles today, the obstacles for this person are not obstacles for this person, because the vision is the focus. It's where I'm going towards and what I'm doing. The obstacles seem like just bumps in the road, just small milestones that I have to overcome. So it's a perspective thing, changing your focus. Let's take a look at habits. Let's take a look at habits. Who is a great multitasker? Can I just see you raise a hand? Someone in this room has got to be a fantastic multitasker. Has anyone got a smartphone? Has everyone got a smartphone? Yeah, or a stopwatch on your wrist? Please get your stopwatch out. Some kind of stopwatch. You're going to time yourself as best you can. So you need a piece of paper, and your stopwatch. It's a little hard because you're going to have to press start, do something and then press stop, but I'm sure you're talented people, I'm sure you'll manage. So what I want you to do is to write down, timing yourself, write down the numbers 1 to 26. So hit start in your stopwatch, physically write down the numbers 1 to 26, hit stop. For those who haven't got paper or a stopwatch, you'll just have to leverage those who do. Watch their experience. Okay, everyone done that? All right, good. So now I want you to do the same thing, timing yourself again, but now doing the letters of the alphabet, A through Z. Reset your stopwatch. Write down your number. Thank you, Fiona. Yes, write down your number, reset your stopwatch, and now time yourself from A to Z. Which, if done right, should also be 26 things. Okay, write down that time and then add the two together. So you've got a total time. Okay, now one more. I want you to do 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and so on all the way through, and time yourself doing that. You have to do number, letter, number, letter, number, letter, number, letter. Yep. That was pretty quick, Ada. Now, if you completed that, check the last time to the addition of the first two. Did anybody beat, in this last one, anyone got a faster time doing this than combining those two together? No? What sort of, anyone want to share their difference? I'm very curious to hear. Nearly double. Yeah, right, okay. So this is a simulation of switching between different tasks. Because in theory, although not completely accurate, numbers is left, brain, letters is right, not completely accurate, but somewhat. You're switching between different modes of thinking, and this is what happens when we try and multitask. When we do many things at once, we're switching to different modes of thinking. So while we think we're doing a lot because we feel like we're getting more done, the reality is our effectiveness goes down. We're much better off to do focused things in small chunks or whatever chunk they require than to try and do many things at once, which can require a lot of discipline because, again, if we come back to our time target, if you've carved out some time here to get some real focused stuff done here, but then something either happens probably more out here, or your friend texts you, you got your messages open and all the notifications going off on your phone, and all of a sudden now your attention gets straight. As soon as your attention goes somewhere else, all of a sudden you've lost the efficiency of the focus. So one of the keys is to make sure that you've got uninterrupted time. So turning all notifications off that you've got on any of your technology is just like the 101 for being more effective with your time. And I'm sure there's someone out there that can do that remarkably well. I haven't found them yet. Now, talking about habits, so the first habit is to eliminate the multitasking. That's number one, and choose to have focused time. So talking about time, one of the keys is around creating space. And when we're flat out busy, this can be really hard to do, because sometimes we feel like if I had time to take time, then I wouldn't need to take the time because I would have the time. So I just can't have it, I can't think about that. I've just got to put my head down and go. And that's the biggest fallacy when it comes to creating time. So dedicating and carving out space for thinking and planning is just the number one habit to adopt. And if you think you haven't got time to carve out for thinking and planning, then you need a lot more time than you think. I heard someone once say, when they were talking about meditating, they were advising someone to, look, just meditate for 3 minutes a day. That's all you got to do, 3 minutes a day. And they said, I haven't got time to meditate for 3 minutes a day. And their response was, well, you need to meditate for 3 hours if you haven't got 3 minutes. And this is kind of the same philosophy. So creating space. So let's look at how we do that. I'm going to walk you through and give you a chance to carve out your default diary. So a default diary is a way that you map out your ideal week. You know, if you could just have a magic wand and carve out and use your time exactly as you want, this is how you do it. So as an example, it might look something like this. This is purely an example, yours could look completely different, but the idea is that you've got the major categories of things that you need to, this is like the rocks, the big buckets, if you like, of categories. So you're carving out times of the week that ideally those different things would fit into. And actually I'll step forward and show you where we're going here. But when combined with, you know, obviously you're going to do this in a very peaceful setting where you've got no interruptions, phone's not ringing, there's no email coming in, so it's easy to carve something like this out. But then you might say, but Jamie, as soon as I sit down at my desk Monday morning, this is all going to go out the window. And it might at first, but there's a gradual approach. So we're going to take the theoretical and apply it to your actual week. So developing the habit of weekly planning. And it doesn't have to be to this level. It could be, you might say, if your time right now is just an absolute mess and you are all over the place, then my advice to you would be pick just one block. Let's say Monday mornings or Tuesday afternoons, whatever it is, pick that one to start with as one big rock that you're just going to carve out. And just learn to say no to everything and just to keep that thing precious. Because then what you're going to learn by doing that, you're going to learn it's possible. You're going to learn the world is not going to fall apart. People aren't going to die unless maybe you're a paramedic, then this might not work. But you know, for most people, the fact is that all the worst case things that we conjure up in our mind, all these fears, they're just not real. Like we think we're needed in so many ways, but the reality is, sadly, we're a lot less important to the world functioning than what we think sometimes. So there's a starting point. And what we're going to do is once we've got our default diary, every week we sit down with our default diary, we sit down with our 90-day plan, which I'm going to walk you through in a second, and we map out our actual week on our actual calendar. So some weeks it may look nothing like this. But you know that if you do that 3 weeks in a row, if you're looking at your actual calendar compared to your default calendar and it looks nothing like each other for 3 weeks in a row, you know there's some problems there. I've got to come back and address something. So we can have minor little hiccups, but extended, that's a systemic problem that we need to address. Do you want to take one of those, Jenny, and pass them back? Same here. What's that? The 11 o'clock? Oh, planning next week? Yeah. On the left hand, you're talking about this one? Oh, I see, the 11 is bigger, right. That's more of a fault of the person that created the slide. Yeah, 11 o'clock goes for a long time. Yeah, so consider this one your starting point, right? I just want you to have a go. And on the back, you can maybe just write down what are the key categories for you that it needs to look like. Maybe you're not involved with marketing at all, so you wouldn't have that on there, or team meetings. If you work by yourself or you work with a spouse, you still need a team meeting. Right? Team meeting is where you sit down and talk about the big rocks and you sit down and you talk about the 90-day plan, which we're going to talk about.
You do that first thing in the morning and last thing at night.
Yeah, whatever works for you, right?
No, you don't, but it's just a really bad habit.
Oh, okay, right.
Thing that's sarcastic.
Okay, right. Okay. The trap I see with spouses is they think because they're with each other all the time, they don't need to have a meeting, because we're talking all the time. But you rarely talk about, in a structured way, about the important things, about proactively building the business. So that's another topic. We're going to talk about that in planning in more detail. But just have a go. Start carving it out. What might it look like? If you drop kids off or pick kids up, that's got to be in there. If you exercise 7 times in 4 days, then put that in there. Remember, this is where you get to choose. This is you choosing and intentionally crafting what you want your week to look like. This is not what you think everyone else wants it to look like. This is what you want it to look like. And you might do an aspirational one, right? You might start with one of those so you can have that up on the wall to motivate you and say, that's what I want to get to. And then you might have one that's going to be applicable maybe for the next 90 days that you're trying to work to, the small step, right? Another factor to think about is when your energy's highest, when you've got better focus, what part of the day. So what things would you put in there? Okay, so hopefully you've got to start there. That can be something that you can take away and complete and have a go at. My experience tells me that the first time you try to do this, it doesn't necessarily go according to plan. But like anything, when you're developing a new skill, it takes time to work out. So, try something, see how it goes, adjust, try again, until you've got, something that works for you. One of our clients, Sue, she's in Western Australia, she runs a PR agency, and it'd been her dream to be able to take every second Friday off. And had her do this exercise, and then, all these reasons started coming up why she couldn't take this every second Friday off. Oh, what if the media calls, what will my team think, all this sort of stuff. And this is normally one of the biggest obstacles, is the fear, which I just want to share this acronym with you. FEAR stands for false expectations appearing real. It's most often a fabrication in our mind. And I walked Sue through this and sort of asked her through the different what ifs and all sorts of things, and finally got her to pluck up the courage to give it a test. What do you think happened? She started taking every second Friday off. Nothing else changed. So I'm not suggesting that's always possible, but just acknowledge that some of the things that stop us from changing or making more intentional choices about our time, it's quite often rooted in this fear. So coming back to another habit, which is almost a tool as well, but I think it's an important habit to develop. And, there's different frameworks for this. And that is what I call a brain dump. So probably most people have a to-do list. People got a to-do list? Anyone got a to-do list? Yep. So no? Okay, good on you, Harry. For me, and I've found for many of our clients, the to-do list is okay, but it doesn't always eliminate the clutter that's going on up here. And usually every day that we wake up, there's something else going on up here. And so I think doing the brain dump is an important thing to do at the very beginning of every day. And all that is taking everything that's in your mind, regardless of how relevant or irrelevant it is to business or whatever it is you think you should be focusing on, but to get it out of your mind and onto a bit of paper. And once you do that, you see your mind, my belief is your mind should be for creative thinking, problem solving, strategic thinking, higher levels of function. It shouldn't be for remembering to pick up the milk on the way home. But yet many of us do. We have all these thoughts running around in our head, and it just takes up space. It just takes up space, and it means that often, I mean, everyone's got different abilities. I'm probably at the lower end of the scale in terms of the amount of things I can keep in my head. So I find it very helpful to get them out of my head. So the brain dump is where you simply start the day by writing out everything that's in your mind, absolutely everything. And you'll find that actual process, and maybe you can relate to this, is somewhat cathartic in that it gets it out of your head and makes it tangible, because now you can see it and you can touch it on the bit of paper. So it's no longer consuming you, it's out here. And now you can sort of look at it and go, okay, what do I need to do about that? And depending on the severity of the day, there might be different steps. But let's say that you wrote your list out and there was, say, this many things on your list. And I'll fast forward here a little bit. The goal of this process is to feel a sense of calm and control. It's not necessarily to be organised, it's all about a feeling. So it's about feeling and starting the day with a sense of control. That's what you're after. So how far you go down this process is dictated by your feelings. So you write your list out. Now, if I looked at that list and I was like, oh, how am I going to get all that done? Right, now I need to know, I need to go further. Or you might look at that list and go, that's fine. Okay, no more work required. But if you look at that list and it looks intense, then you categorise. And we categorise with A's, B's, C's, D's, and E's. E equals eliminate. D equals delegate. A is urgent and important. So back to our task. This is the demand stuff. The B is the not urgent but important. And C is just a nice to do. So then we can look at that and go, okay, well, I know I've got to get these done because fires are burning. And I know this is the next thing that should be most important to me. So now you look at, if I just did those things today, how does the day look? And again, depends on whether it's, the feeling you get inside. And if you look at that and go, I'm still not sure, then you start putting numbers. Let's say I had 3 A's, for example. I might go, okay, that's the most important one, that's number 1, that's number 2, and that's number 3. Or whatever the order happens to be. And then that's the order you attack it with. And back to our point of focus, you don't worry about anything else until you get that number 1 done. Once you've got the number 1 done, you move on to number 2. Now, what happens if halfway through number 1, someone screams in your office another A or another most important thing? You just make sure you put it on the list. Put on the list and act appropriately. But the key is to make sure you've always got things. You're not keeping urgent things or things in your mind that are creating stress. Stressful things always should be down on paper. So that's the brain dump. So we firstly make a list. If we need to, we then go and categorise. If we need to, we prioritise. But the goal is to start the day with a feeling of control. I'm going to skip ahead to one of our slides later on, but more important than time choices is how we manage our state and the energy we bring to the time. Because it's not about time, right? It's not about have I got 5 hours today or have I got 7 hours today. It's like, how much energy do I bring to that 5 hours? How much energy and focus? Because what could take one person 5 hours who is feeling lethargic and unfocused or scattered or stressed or whatever it might be, can take the person who's focused, calm and in control 2 hours, right? So that's why we always want to start. We want to get rid of the stress at the beginning of the day and start in control. Coming back to our default diary and allocating our time, I glossed over this a little bit and I just want to make sure I come back to it, but there's 3 tools that we use to plan our day or week. One is the default diary or default calendar. One is the 90-day plan. And one is your actual calendar. So, actual calendar, I mean, it doesn't matter what you use, but it's somewhere to put down the important allocations of time. You can use paper. I've got clients who use paper. You can use digital, whatever works best for you. There's no best tool there. Plenty of choices. But what you do at the beginning of the day is you sit down with a default diary, a default calendar. You sit down with your 90-day plan. I'll expand on that for a second. And we're going to go into a lot more detail on the 90-day plan in the session on planning. But the 90-day plan stems from understanding where your life goals are. From there, designing the business that's going to serve those. Business design. Business design stems into 3 to 5 year goals, stems into 1 year goals, stems into 90-day priorities. And what we do is we have those 90-day priorities on a one-pager, and I'm going to share tools and formats with you for that. One-pager that looks at the weeks of the 90 days and the different things that have to get done. And there's different formats you can use, but the point being that one-page tool is a real clear focus that you know that you can focus on. It's very hard to focus on long-term and short-term at the same time, but 90 days is a good period of time where we can sort of get clear about what we need to do. So having this in front of us with our default diary allows us to plan our actual calendar and put the things on there that are critical for this, that match up with our default. Again, it's not a perfect science, but these are the tools that help keep us focused and help us make choices. Because one of the biggest tools that you actually have is the ability to say no. You know, when ideas come to you, do you want to do this? Or here's an idea we could do, or this, that, and the other, the shiny object syndrome that most entrepreneurs seem to suffer from, that all can be easily eliminated when we've got the clarity of this. Clarity brings the ability to say yes or no very quickly to opportunities and things. It's either going to move you forward where you know you want to go, or it's going to take you off track. It's a yes or no. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. Okay, let's take a look at the last point, leverage. Well, last point in our series around concepts around time. This is sort of expanding on the habits, but now getting into some of the tools and techniques that we might want to use beyond from what we've talked about so far. And let's start with another exercise for you, how to create more time. So this will be a little bit familiar. It builds on the themes and the things we've done so far. There you go, thanks Pat. There you go. How can I create more time? So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to work through this one. So it's all written out there. What you're going to do is, number one, similar to what you did with your default calendar, but maybe in a little more detail, is write down what your current roles or the major tasks are that you currently spend your time doing. What are the things that consume your time? And then you're going to write an hourly rate next to those things. Like if you had to pay someone else to do them, how much would that cost? It can be a guesstimate. And then you're going to flip the page and you're going to map those things on our skills value matrix. You're going to plot those things. So you just take, the numbers 1 through however many you end up with, say 1 through 7. You don't have to have 15 things, just so you know. You could have 3 things. But the idea here is you're going to walk through and work out what you need to get off your plate to free up time. So you're going to plot them on the graph, and then you get starting with the things that are low value, low skill. You're going to either choose to systemize them, delegate them, or eliminate them. And you're going to start to prioritize the things that are going to come off your plate. If you're up to the stage of prioritizing, you're starting with the things that are lowest skill and lowest value, probably, or things you don't enjoy doing can be another criteria. So then take a look at your number 1 or number 2 and just write down a couple of things that you could do to move that off in the next 90 days. What are a couple of things you could do to get that off your plate? Or systemize it or eliminate it. That's an easy one. So I'll give you one more minute there. Of course, the other way, that's, the approach we're describing here is sort of a bottom-up approach of getting rid of the low-value things that you're doing. The other way is, coming back to the big rock philosophy that Stephen Covey talked about, is just being super clear on what are the things up in the top, what are the things up here, and how do we just put those on the calendar first, so that I'm spending, again, depending on where you're starting from, but the goal is to get to a point where you're spending 80% of your time on those things. So if the starting point is 20% of your time on those things, how do you do that in the next 90 days? How do you just sort of just do that and allow the other stuff to fall in around it? Another client that just started, I'm walking through this. Grant runs a printing company. One of the things I described to him was the art of intentional neglect. So, because he reamed off to me all the things that are on his to-do list. Grant's got a team of 35 people, and he had the biggest to-do list I've ever seen in my life. And I just picked things at random and said, Grant, what would happen if that didn't get done? And invariably the answer is, well, nothing too much. And so we had the discussion about intentional neglect, like knowing about all the things that need to get done, but actively choosing not to do them. So I'm just not going to do that. I'm just choosing not to do that. And to some things there might be consequences, but again, the consequences are going to be put in context of the goals you're after. If you're going to upset someone, sometimes that's okay, right? You don't have to keep everybody happy, right? At the end of the day, it's about, what is important for you and your business that you want to move forward, not from a uncompassionate point of view or anything like that, but just simply recognizing, whose drum we're marching to. Anyway, if you need more time on that exercise, I encourage you to take that time in that creating space of thinking and planning time that you're going to do from now on, just so you've got a bit of an idea or an awareness and a plan around the things you're going to move off your plate. So let's look at some more tactics and systems. I'm really quite reluctant to get into too much detail here because there is just a plethora of tools and things we can be using, but rather, let's start at some of the categories which I think are really important to develop some mastery around. We talked already a little bit about to-dos, but if you're the sort of person that has sticky notes everywhere, it might be time to sort of consolidate that. Again, if it works for you brilliantly, then who am I to judge? But generally speaking, having one place for these things is a good idea. And then a place to keep your nice to-dos. Like, we all have ideas, and how do you capture those and put them somewhere? If you've got somewhere where you can put those things, there's an idea, let me put it over here. There's another idea, let me put it here. That's a good idea, let me put it over here. Then you've captured them and you can let it go. So the parking lot, as I call it, is a great thing to have ready to bring out when it's time to do the next 90-day plan or the next annual plan. Let's bring the parking lot out and we can have a look at all those brilliant ideas, because odds are when you pull them out 3 months later, 60% of them are going to be, that's not relevant. But what we generally sometimes do is we allow those things again to rattle around up here in the grey matter and distract us and take up space. And they look exciting and new at the time, but with a bit of time passed, they're not always. But some things you want to keep, like some things you do want to, because they are great ideas and you don't want to lose them. But at the same time, you don't want to use your mind for keeping track of them. Inbound communications. Holy, what have we got these days? We've got social media, we've got Messenger, arguably the same thing. We've got email, SMSs, phones. What else is there? Is there anything new in the last 24 hours that's come up? But there's tons of it, right? So having a method to manage all that. My preferred method is not to manage it, just don't do it. But that's not applicable for everyone. In fact, I was just listening to a interview on the way here with Alex Honnold. Anyone watch Free Solo? Free Solo, fantastic. So I was listening to him interviewed, and he said when he was leading up to that climb, he just stopped responding to emails. And he said the most interesting thing happened, he just stopped getting emails. He said it was great. We can't all do that, obviously, but we can change our behaviour with emails. We can train people. A realtor I've had a fair bit to do with over in Canada, you ring her voice message says, I'll be returning calls between at 11 o'clock and 4 p.m. If it's urgent, I'll get back to you then. Otherwise, please send me an email and I'll deal with it in due course. So she just doesn't answer her phone, right? So you think about how much time that frees up. Now, she's exceptional at what she does, and she has a waiting list of people to work with her. So she's not killing her business by doing that, right? If we're struggling, we're starting up and we're looking to create momentum, that may not be the first strategy to put in place. But eventually, when we've got the other systems in place and we're delivering value, we can do things like that. So methodology for your inbox. I'm not a big fan of archiving in categories and all this sort of stuff. If you're spending a lot of time managing your email, you're probably doing it wrong. I personally am an advocate of Gmail. Sorry, Angus. I'm sure you guys have got great search. Use search, right? If you just hit the archive button on your email when you're done with an email, and you can find it anytime just through search. So we don't have to have the folder off to the side that's for this and that and the other. I've seen people do it and they just spend hours sorting all their email, or they don't sort it because they want to make sure it's sorted properly so it just sits in the inbox. And again, some of these things are personal choices. You might do well with 1,000 unread emails in your inbox. Personally, it causes me stress, so I choose not to do it. But have a methodology that you work through there. And probably a good time to mention, this is probably more of a habit one, but the one-touch system, where, you know, when you pick up that piece of mail or you go to your email, you go there with the intention, if you open it, you deal with it. Or you have a way, another system to put in the right place so that it's not sitting there burning on your conscience, you know, day in, day out. You know, and I feel free to, I can go into more detail on things that I do outside of this session, but, you know, having your own systems, and it can sometimes take some time to develop those, but just recognize where you might be doing multi-touch to things. You know, if you read an email 5 times before you respond to it, might not be the best use of time. So tools, 9-day plan is a key one, and the brain dump we've already talked about. Paper-based, I am still a big fan of paper. I actually do my brain dump once. If I've got a big one to do, I'll do it on a full bit of paper, but invariably I keep a stack of, not this one's printed on both sides, but paper that's printed on one side, and I keep a stack of those, and I pull one out every morning and I fold it in quarters, like this, pretend that was blank. I put the date at the top, and I just write the top 3 things I could get done for that day on that list. And that just sits in my pocket here with a pen. And so I'm not pulling out technology, I'm not doing anything fancy. So when someone says, can you do something, Jamie? I pull it out and I write it down here, and then at a later stage I'll go and put that wherever it needs to go to make sure it's captured. So I love technology, but I don't think you have to use technology exclusively to keep yourself organised. But you can too. I mean, it depends on what you use, whatever works for you. A calendar we've already talked about. Again, try not to keep things in your head. A project planning tool. Again, we're starting to get into specifics around tools, but I'm a huge fan of Trello. Trello is sort of an open source, open development, not open source, but it's a free to use system for keeping track of things. Our team, many of our clients run their businesses, their projects on Trello. But there's lots of other good ones out there. Just happens to be a nice Australian company. And then this is probably a secret weapon of mine, Evernote. Does anybody else use Evernote? I use Evernote as my catch-all. If I don't know where to put something, I throw it in Evernote. It is technology. It sits on this, but it has a scanning device. For instance, today our property insurance came in. I generally don't keep paper. I scanned it, threw it on Trello, but you know, if it's something, say it was, if you gave me a book recommendation, I'd take a photo of it, throw it on Evernote, and I'd make a note that it's a book about this, and so I've captured it, put it somewhere. You know, there's a lot of ways to use it, but it's a place I can just dump everything, and it's very searchable. So I don't have to worry about how I'm filing it or how I'm sorting it or how I'm labeling it. I just dump it in there, and I can usually most of the time find it. My other theory is that if you've got a filing system or you file something away and you can't find it, then odds are if it's important enough, it'll find its way back to you. I tend to find that happens with bills, you know. And I mentioned this one already, but the art of saying no is probably one of the most powerful tools in terms of time choices. Just being a little more liberal in what you intentionally say yes to and what you say no to. It can be great practice because, I mean, you think about how you feel when you've got to say no to someone, to something. Sometimes we can feel like we're letting someone down or there's an obligation, like we should say yes. and we don't like that form of uncomfortableness or that potential conflict. So we just say, oh yeah, I'll do that. I can do that for you. No worries. Yeah, I'll be a part of that. Yes, I'll sit on that committee. I'll do this, I'll do that. And next thing you know, our time gets filled up. So if you have any kind of that feeling in saying those things, start practicing, even things that don't matter. Practice saying no to them and just get used to that feeling. Because the more you can say that, it's a liberating feeling. A liberating feeling. A little hack there is if someone asks you to do something, follow up with I'd love to do that. Here's what I can do. And so instead of saying yes to that, you're giving them another offer of something else that you can do to help them out with their cause. So, would you be on that committee? I'd love to do that, but here's what I can do. I can ask these 3 people for you, if you like. I can introduce you to these people. So you're not just completely rejecting someone, but you're giving them another pathway forward. All right, let's bring it all together. So number 1 is our, how we think about ourselves and how we describe ourselves and our relationship to time. Number 2 is the habits, so creating space and being disciplined around our planning. The principles, what are your big rocks, knowing what's most important and where you bring the most value and putting those in your calendar first. And number 4 is not elimination, but the process of leverage. So we're either eliminating something, systemizing it, delegating it, and finding ways to ease our burden. So we talked about the real problem. The real problem was our choices and habits, and it's never about the amount of time. So I've got a bit of a formatting problem there, but the real problem, as I alluded to earlier, is the energy that we bring to the time. I'm not going to do this subject justice because I'm going to talk about it on one slide, but I'm going to argue that you could almost forget about everything else I've said, and if you focus on the amount of energy that you bring to what you do, you'll be amazed at what the difference can make, even if you don't change any of your systems or habits. And I've got this book up there, The Power of Full Engagement. A guy called Jim Lower wrote it. Jim's a peak performance coach, if you like, or a peak performance psychologist. He started his career working with high-level athletes, like many names you'd recognise, people that have gone to the number 1 in their field. And one of the things that he works on with them is not around their technique so much or how they think, but it's about their recovery. He talks about how he helps them with recovery. For example, with tennis players, it'll be the micro little recoveries that he does while they're playing the game. So helping them to learn how to breathe properly, learning to recognise what are those moments when they can relax. And doing those micro little recoveries helps them throughout the performance of what they're doing. Also, he talks about athletes, they have an off season generally. Like they'll train really hard and they'll have their competitive season, then they have a huge off season. But when he came to the business world, he recognised that business people rarely have an off season. They're just always go, 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 go. And this is severely detrimental to our performance. So building in rest is absolutely critical. But what else can we do to affect our energy? There are some unusual ones. Number 1 I've got in here is relationships. If you have any toxic relationships in your life, I can guarantee they are sucking energy right out of your life. So they don't have to be perfect, but sort out any issues you've got, because then you can be free, more emotionally free. And your emotional energy is some of your strongest energy that you've got. Obviously your health, I mean, we all know the most common things here. We've got to eat well, we've got to sleep well, we've got to exercise. Some new science coming out in a new book around breathing is fascinating if you're looking for some insights around that. But I generally find that the lead domino in the health aspect, and I've heard the same thing from others, is the sleep. When we get the right amount of sleep, we wake up fresher and it's easier to make good decisions throughout the day, and our thinking is clearer. Gone are the days where you're burning it's noble to burn the candle at both ends. There is just tons of science out now to show that if you don't sleep well, and sleeping before midnight is the key, those earlier hours of the evening is really key. No technology before you go to bed. Great wearables around now to work out how well you're sleeping, depends what you're into, but you can really get into the science and data. But that would be a key starting point, is where your sleep is at. Yeah, sleep, nutrition, exercise, all the usual things that we know we should be doing, but sometimes maybe not doing as well as we should. Focus and perspective. So I shared with you the vision, right? The clearer your vision for your company, the more exciting that vision is on where you're going, the more energy you're going to have to go to that. If your focus is going into the 9-to-5 grind and just doing it again and putting up with all these complaining customers and this, that, and the other, your energy is going to be down here. If you've got this vision of building this incredible company that's making a difference and you're clear about the purpose on that, you're going to wake up in a different way. Not to say there won't be ups and downs, but this is the fuel. The purpose and the drive and the vision for your company is part of the emotional fuel that you've got each day. And sorry, just on the perspective, sometimes in the day-to-day, like we can have this long-term vision that we want to create and exciting, but the day-to-day grind, sometimes we can lose sight of that. So I think it's very important to have things in your environment that remind you of what you're doing. So look at your environment around you in your office space and ask yourself, is this inspiring? Like, do I walk in here and do I feel good in this space? Or do I feel a bit down or just feel drab? So you can put your vision up on the wall, you can put pictures around, you can do whatever it is that you need to do to create the space that's going to lift you up. Physiology, right? Sitting down all day versus standing up, shoulders back, chin up, smiling, deep breathing, all these things affect how we feel in the moment. If you're spending a lot of time in front of a computer, it can be really easy to gradually get to this, this position. And if you think about what happens to your body in this position, you breathe shallower because you're hunched over. Science shows as soon as you look down, your emotional energy goes down. So being crouched over a computer is extremely detrimental to your productivity. Jim Lowe talks about this a lot. He talks about email apnea. Right, not sleep apnea, but email apnea, because we have so much screen time and doing in this position, it's crippling to our energy. Now, if you're in front of a desk and you do have to be sitting for long periods of time, interrupt it. Do sprints, do 45-minute focus sprints, put a timer on, put a clock on, and then at the end of that, do something, get up, stretch, do some star jumps, push-ups, go for a walk outside, whatever it is, but getting yourself moving is really important. Language, not only outward language, but internal language. So putting a focus and becoming very aware of the words you're using. I touched on this at the beginning around the default language we've got around time. But not only about time, just about everything in life. Are you speaking positively to yourself? Are you speaking with uplifting language? Are you focused on things that are making your life better? Or are you focusing and talking about things that are not? What do you listen to? What information goes into your head on a daily basis? Do you listen to the news or are you listening to inspirational podcasts? All these things affect the way that you think, as minor as they may be, but they all stack up. They all stack up, and if you can make some small changes and be a little more proactive in some of these areas, you might be amazed at the change in your energy. Because again, to summarise, the energy you bring to the time is more important than the tools, the techniques, all the rest of it, because it's about the output you can create is a function of the energy you bring. Folks, that is a wrap. I've talked about a lot there, and depending on what your starting point is, if you've already done a lot of this sort of stuff, then there might be a few minor tweaks. If you've done none of this sort of stuff before, please don't walk out of here today thinking you've got to do it all tomorrow. The goal is small little changes. This is all being recorded, so you can come back to it and in the next 90 days say, okay, what's the next thing? In the next year, what's the next thing? But hopefully there has been some value for you today. And once again, thank you all for coming out. And maybe we'll see you at the next one, which is all about compounding profitability.